Like, I feel like you should be able to go down to a university just with your like YouTube watch list or history and just go, here, look, I watched 400 hours of YouTube videos with the word inflation in it. Now give me an economics degree. It should be something like that. And people are like, watching YouTube videos doesn't make you an expert. Yes, it does. That's how information works.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Learning From Them. I am your host, Jesso, a comedian, and this podcast is essentially me choosing people that I like and want to learn from and then getting them on Zoom and pressing record and recording the conversation. In today's episode, you will be viewing my casual conversation with comedian David Boyle. All his links and descriptions are in the description. We met here at Sydney after a gig that we both did and just got chatting. I was actually telling him about my podcast and he told me about his much more proclaimed podcast. It's called I'm Quitting Alcohol and it's really cool. He has tracked every day for over 3.5 years. He's tracked his sobriety with a minimum 5 minute a day podcast. And because he's a comedian, it's very funny. And because he's very down to earth, honest, vulnerable, it's really relatable and deep and interesting. I mean, some episodes are definitely none of that, but with thousands of episodes, what do you expect? But it's a really high caliber podcast, and he has got a great following because of it. So check that out. And yeah, I really enjoy chatting with him. We have a good rapport. We're talking about working on projects together. And here is, I'll let you be the judge. Enjoy the show. Recording in progress. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to my podcast, which still does not have a main name. Comedian David Boyle from I'm Quitting Alcohol. I've listened to it so much that it's in my head.
I'm comedian David Boyle, yes.
And what do people call you?
Quitting alcohol.
David Boyle?
No, just usually Boyle.
Boyle, right, okay.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, welcome Boyle to the podcast, which has no name. Thank you you're in India at the moment. Can you tell me not so much about that because it's not relevant right now, but about yourself?
Generally about myself. Just very broadly tell me about yourself.
Let's talk about your comedy. Like, you're a full-time comic now, right? Or what do you do with your time and creative juices?
Well, yeah, I only do comedy related things. So the podcast, I do a podcast, I'm Quitting Alcohol, and that has a Patreon, so that brings me in money. Then gigging brings in a little bit of money. But I wouldn't say the podcast is my main income. Podcasting is my main income, and the stand-up is, the side hustle. Because you can't earn in Australia anyway, really, unless you're selling tickets.
Where can you earn without selling tickets?
In the US, you've got the road, you can do the clubs. There's only one club per city in Australia. You can't really be a club comedian in Australia. You can hustle around, do gigs, headline. You can scratch out a living. You can be a road dog in Australia, but it's fucking hard work.
And how long have you been doing comedy?
How long is it now? Probably, I would say 10, 12 years, something like that. You don't count like the first year, 2 years, because you're doing like 3 gigs a night or 3 gigs a month. No, not even 3 gigs a month. It's like 3 gigs a year. What am I talking about?
I'm glad to hear that's normal. Like and then what's the increase? Like, how does it become exponential or
exponential?
Your journey. I know it doesn't. Tell me your journey from 3 gigs a year.
Yeah, it's just harder getting gigs at the start because you suck. No one knows you. No one wants to put you up. No one's interested. And then slowly you make friends, they open rooms, you do more gigs, you get to know people, network, that sort of shit, which I did none of that. But you start getting a little bit better. You start getting a little bit better, and then people are more willing to put you up.
Yeah. Networking is so crucial. I mean, I quite enjoy
I did
it.
none.
Really?
Yeah, you
well,
seem like you're good at networking.
I mean, you were younger when you started. How old were you?
I did my first gig ever when I was 19, and then I didn't do it again until I was like 24, 25 or something.
Wow. Well, at 19 or 24 or 25, I could not have networked, but now I'm 35. Like you're a bit more comfortable in yourself. You know how to talk to people. You're one of the older ones as well. It's so easy to talk to people who are younger than you.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. That's true.
So,
when I started, me and a handful of other like outcasts were just like bitter comics on the outside, shitting on everyone.
yeah,
And we still are
that,
to a certain extent.
yeah, I think there's a lot of cliques within comedy and everyone's doing it to each other and everyone's kind of, well, there's some who are just the victims, I think, unfortunately.
I don't notice the cliques as much in Sydney.
Really?
No, the cliques aren't as visible.
Interesting.
In Melbourne, there was a lot of sort of cliquey sort of things or groups.
Yeah. And you did, how long were you in Melbourne for and when did you move to Sydney?
So I started in Sydney. I did my first like 2 or 3 years in Sydney, and then I moved down to Melbourne and I was in Melbourne for 8 years.
Right.
So, but I only count one of those years in Sydney. That's when I was doing proper comedy. The first 2 years I was just fucking around, pretty much drinking. It was just to get drunk, and then I was bombing. I bombed every single gig for my first year, every single one. Like
Really?
there was no reason I should have continued comedy after my first year. There was
That's madness.
It was insane. It was like, I didn't even have jokes. I was just trying to roll on I thought I was so funny naturally that I could just jump on stage and just roll. And and I'm so dumb that I continued doing that you should learn that you can't do that after like 10 or so gigs or even like 4, but I just kept doing it for like 20, 30 gigs. And it was a humiliating year. And then I was like, maybe I should write a joke. And then as soon as I started writing jokes, things started turning around amazingly.
And it was that joke about the rabbits. The rabbit, you betting on the rabbit, not the greyhound.
No, that was the joke I wrote when I was 19, and that's why I didn't do another gig for like 5 or 6 years.
Right.
I was like, I have fucking nothing to say.
I really like that joke. I mean, I don't know how you delivered it, but if you said that, I would laugh. That's funny.
It's 19-year-old funny.
Okay, so
no, it was something about ecstasy.
And rabbits and greyhounds, or
it was something about ecstasy and toilet cleaner, and I don't know, just going straight to the toilet cleaner. If I knew.
Yeah, you've lost me. Stick to the greyhounds. Okay, so let me get the timeline. So you started when you're 19 and now you're about 37
now.
Yeah,
I'm 38. Yeah,
so that's almost 20 years, and you have done comedy, and you've just done your Edinburgh, first time in Edinburgh last year.
Yeah.
And do you Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Edinburgh, Scotland. And do you think, so I want to talk about your podcast because it's one of the best things I've heard this year. I know it's only 10th of January. No, I really like it. I'm a really big fan. But so how do you think that because of this podcast, you've got over 20,000 followers. I hope you don't mind me sharing this information. You've cut out a little bit.
Yeah, I know it's going to be a little bit like that. Just every now and then, it's gonna yeah.
That's all right. I did mention up front that you're in India. Is that relevant
It's
now?
back though.
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's okay.
It's okay now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every like 20 minutes or half an hour, it's gonna do that.
Okay. Well, we're only doing 40 minutes maybe, so I hope this is recording properly. Anyway, what did you hear? Should I just start again?
I heard that you like my podcast, and thank you for that.
I really
Appreciate
like it. And many people do. You've got listeners from all over the world. And do you think, like, how much has that now contributed to your comic success, your stand-up comedy success, like selling tickets? Did you go to Edinburgh because of that, etc.?
Yeah, it's all of it. So I went to Edinburgh, did the Fringe Festival, and I did my hour in Dublin and London as well. Sold some tickets in all those places. It's all due to the podcast. It's 100% podcast. Otherwise, there'd be nothing without the podcast.
Wow. Because I didn't realize that every comedian had podcasts. It was only when I started like listening to you, and then I knew a few people did, but like it is the thing, right? You're telling the Indian comedians that you're meeting. Yeah. So I guess
I tell everyone,
this is mine.
You should just start a podcast. Even if you're not a comedian, just start a podcast about whatever you're into. I don't know, astrology, rocks, anything. Just start. It gives you something to do. Even if no one's going to listen to it, you might as well do it. No one's going to listen to you anyway.
That's true. That's true. And at least like your grandkids might, like they might pull it out of an old disc one day and be like, well,
that's a percentage of the reason why I started doing my podcast, because I thought I was going to die, and I was like, I need to leave something for my son. My son was just like 1 year. He was a 1-year-old. So I was like,
I heard you talking about that. I've been going back through with Diego, my partner. We've been listening from day 1. We're up to day 36, and you talked about. You're like, I didn't even think I'd be alive at this point. Whoa. And other things.
Yeah.
So can you tell me about I mean, I already know about it, but can you please tell my listeners about your podcast? Why did you start it? What contributed to the other percents besides your child legacy?
So my podcast is I'm Quitting Alcohol, and I started recording on the day I quit drinking, and I just do 5 minutes a day, and I talk about like at the start it was a little bit about the journey I was going on. I don't know, it's evolved into something else now. So at the start it was just what I'm going through, and then progressively, you can't speak about quitting alcohol for, I don't know, 1,300 days now. So it's a comedy podcast, but also you get to see like the development. There's an overarching story type thing to it, and that's what it is. It's just me talking shit every day, pretty much.
Yeah, it's good shit. I mean, some shit some days is better than others, but like it's still just so.
Do you know what's fucking crazy? I've done 1,300 and I don't know 20 something. No, it's 1,333 episodes today will be, and people will listen to like 1,332, and then I'll do like one that's slightly boring, and I'll get a message just going, "Hey, what's going on? Like, I'm gonna stop listening if it's this bad." I'm like, fucking, I'm just giving you like 10,000 hours of shit.
Yeah.
One fucking day.
You're cutting out a little bit, but I got the gist of what you're saying. And
people are.
I think it's okay now.
Yeah.
It makes it legit. It's just a couple of people on Zoom. That's what happens.
Just a couple of, yeah. If they're this far in, then they'll keep going through that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you get regular emails from listeners as well, daily. Are you nice to the people who give you shit? You're just like, oh, okay, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, I'm nice to them as well. Like, they are fans, but Jesus Christ, some of them are fucking. No, mainly it's all positive. Mainly it's just people thanking me because the podcast has helped them in some sort of way.
Yeah.
So the thing about the podcast is I'm as raw as I can possibly be in it. I just say everything. I put everything on the table. And I think, I don't know, people respond to that. And I don't know how people react to it. I suppose you just don't feel alone. You're like, oh, I feel like that, and I haven't heard anyone say it like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. And I think you talk about such a wide variety of things because it's just like whatever's on your mind that day. You're just really, really good at like everyone has a bunch of thoughts and mess in their mind, but you're able to kind of like structure it and it comes out your mouth in a way that people can listen to. Like that is your stream of consciousness comes out of your mouth and it just makes sense. Like it's not jumbled, it's like easy to listen to and it's relatable and you cover everything. And I said to you, like, I can see why it's so relatable because I've listened to probably 50 episodes now. And so often I'm like, I just want to interject. I just want to like talk to you and be like, oh, that's what I do too. Oh, I think that's funny as well. Oh, that's an interesting perspective. Oh, wow, you are different to me, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
All these things.
It's the human experience.
It's a very human experience.
Oh my God.
And I heard that's
embarrassing to
say. What I missed the joke. I'm just laughing because you're just funny.
No, I'm saying that's embarrassing to say. It's the human experience.
Oh yeah. I can edit that out. I heard you say in one of the early episodes that you had a dream, but you'd had 2 beers and you're like, oh no, I can't do the podcast, and you're like beating yourself up about it. Even that's really relatable.
Yeah, I still get those dreams all the time. I had one like maybe 3 or 4 days ago.
Oh,
you
really?
just sit in there drinking. You're like, no, why did I do it? I had it was because I quit sugar as well, and I have dreams about eating sugar, and it's the same thing. I'm like, oh my God, why did I eat that Mentos?
Oh, wow.
And it's Mentos for some reason. You know, the fruity ones? Yeah, I like them.
They are delicious and full of sugar.
They are.
So you've quit sugar as well. I want to ask you more about that, but I might just ask you about that privately because I want to hear about a little bit more about comedy. Can you tell me, like, where do your ideas come from, like your jokes? And once you have an idea, how do you write your jokes?
The process is just scatter. It's scattershot for me because, like, I can't sit there and just write. I've tried it a million times. Just go to the notebook and like force myself to write something, just stream of conscience. I can't do it. Consciousness. It's fucking stream of consciousness, isn't it?
I've heard you talk about this on the podcast as well. I feel like
I thought I'd lock that down. I'm like, yeah, stream of consciousness. Yeah. I can't do it. And plus the way it's structured in writing is not the way you say it on stage. So if I'm doing a joke correctly, this is how I'd like to do it. I come up with an idea, then I go for a long walk and talk it out. I talk it out over an hour, and then I get it pieced together, and then I go on stage, I try it, I find the bit Like I find the punchline, I find the idea, and then I listen to it back. I take away all the bullshit, and then I can come back and I can restructure it and change it with writing. That's if I'm doing it like a professional. Like that's the process that works. What I generally do is just sit around and wait and do nothing till I get something that I think might be funny. I take it to stage. I bomb because I haven't done anything with it. And then the bomb forces me to like recalibrate the joke. I don't listen to it. I don't listen to it back. I go back on stage. I bomb with the same joke again because I haven't changed anything. And then I'm like, all right, now I'm going to change something. And so I change it a little bit, go back on stage, it's bombed slightly less. And that's the process. My process is more like smashing your head against a brick wall.
Yeah.
That's my process. So you know how you know how you know what you should do, but you never do it.
Yeah. That's the human experience.
That's my process.
Yeah.
Like I know what I should do, I just don't do it.
I guess that's because you're brave enough. You're brave enough and experienced enough to just be like, oh, I'll just try it on stage. And you can handle the heat of a bomb. And I'm sure a lot of other comedians can as well, but like early on, the idea of doing that sounds like hell to me. I just want everything to be perfect and then it's not anyway, but at least I feel like it might be.
Yeah, because I've got the scar tissue bombs mean absolutely nothing to me anymore. Absolutely. I don't even feel it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can sit there while I'm bombing and just fuck around with the joke and see how it goes and then get off stage and
it's just like, you and the microphone, like the audience isn't really there anymore. You're like, oh, well, this is what happens in the podcast. No one's there to laugh at you.
Yeah, that's true. I've learned to be able to talk through it and it doesn't affect me. But early days, bombs used to affect me bad.
Really?
I couldn't shake them off. It would take like months for me to shake off a real bad bomb.
Wow, really? I feel blessed that I don't really have that, but
it used to hurt bad. Yeah, you probably don't bomb as bad. I have some that like still that haunt me.
Really?
Yeah.
And this resilience that you have to now, is this before or after Edinburgh? Because you did mention that Edinburgh was pretty brutal.
Edinburgh was brutal. Even more after Edinburgh. Before Edinburgh, I was at the stage where I thought I'd stopped caring completely, but I realized I still had some hope, some hope inside me that comedy was gonna work out in some way or was gonna be this amazing thing. After Edinburgh, I realized, comedy is just a glorified mental illness, pretty much. And I saw behind the curtain and now I do not care.
Yeah. I heard you talk about recently, like, oh, I've got comedy and loads of comedians are out there with their comedy and they're my age, but at least you've nailed down like the wife and kids. Like you're so grateful that you got that. That's a nice thing. And I was like, oh, I should work harder at my relationship and not get too wound up in comedy because
that's the good thing. Like you do end up, because the comedy can be so bad at some time, like most of the time, you do work on your outside life a lot more than you probably would without comedy. So like, So I remember I used to bomb. This is like in the earlier days, and I used to come back home and just like, instead of being in the fetal position, just come home, hug my wife, just go, I'm going to be a better man. I'm going to do everything better. Except comedy.
Comedy hates me, but you love me, don't you? Yeah, it is important. You can get, like, I can see how people could get, if you really dedicate yourself to it, it's quite consuming. It's time consuming. Like, how do you manage, and this is a good question, one I really would like you to answer. How do you manage your comedy life, which is like a nighttime gig and busy, and especially in the days where you're like having to work really hard, with your family life? How do you balance that? Do you have to have a very patient partner?
Well, now that, yeah, she's very patient. Without her, none of this would have happened anyway. But if I was working still, if I still had a day job, it would be virtually impossible to do everything. But I get that because I don't have the job, I get all that. I can work the 8 hours in the day. So like I can use those hours that someone would be working a normal job, and I can just do whatever I want in those hours. And then I have that period from like picking my son up from school, like about 3:30 till 7:30, where I have to be like a dad, husband type thing. And then after that, it's pretty much, it's okay. I can be out of the house. I can
Active free time.
But it's still tough.
Yeah.
It's still tough. I don't really sleep as much as I should, because what happens is, as well, is like you need the time by yourself. You need to decompress everything, especially after gigs. Like, even though it doesn't affect me anymore, like emotionally, still the adrenaline dump and all that sort of shit. So you need to bring everything back down, and that takes a couple of hours. So like you're not sleeping till late, and then I wake up early because I got a 2-year-old daughter, I got my son, so got to do all the morning shit. So it is tough, but yeah, if I had a job on top of that, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, at least you're not drinking. Like, sleep.
Yeah,
Sleep's pretty, like, not having sleep really ruins my mental health, but I've noticed like it's usually to do with alcohol. Like,
is it? Yeah.
But not sleeping properly when you have alcohol. I
haven't drunk in 4 years almost, and the sleep, if I don't sleep properly, I'm just all over the place. I'm running at like 60% if I don't get like 6.5 hours sleep.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like
I can run
much.
on. Yeah, but that's a fair bit for me at the moment. But now I'm in India. I'm in India at the moment, so I'm getting like 9 hours, and it's beautiful. It's so good.
Tell me about being in India. So your wife is Indian. You're over there with your kids. She's back here. Amazing. I mean, we don't have to talk about your family, sorry, but this is just like, so you have creative space. This is what I'm asking about. Like, what's your creative space at the moment?
It's, at the moment I'm reading a lot. So, the creative space is, so I'm in India. I'm here with my kids. My wife's getting an Australian passport, so she couldn't come over. So I brought the kids over. I brought the kids over because I want them raised Indian as well. So that's the reason why I'm here. But also, when you're in India, there's so much family around that they just take care of the kids. So I, for this period, am barely a dad. So I wake up, I do what I want. I read in the morning. I'm reading books, which never, like, it does happen at home, but I have to like scratch out my own time to do that. Now I'm like casually during the day reading. It's beautiful. So that's so a big part.
Sorry to interrupt, so nice. But are you a big reader? Like, you read books? You always have been?
From the age of like 19. Before that, I was like sports. I was like obsessed with sports. So I would read, but they were like sports people, memoirs and autobiographies and shit like that.
Right.
But from the age of 19, 20, I became an avid reader. One of my mates gave me the book On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and I read that, and it pretty much ruined my life. So
haven't read it, so why? Because you love books. You're like, that's a good book.
no,
Give
it's
me
just
more.
like one of those stories. They're young and they do a road trip through the States, and everyone's like on this vibe. And there's a character in it, Dean Moriarty, who's just like, he's the epitome of what you want to be as like a young dude. He's just a wild guy. It's
Right.
it's one of those books. Everyone, it like inspired Bob Dylan, like all these like hero type characters were inspired by this book. But if you follow that book past the age of like 24, 25, it begins to destroy your life.
Right. Well, so for people who don't, I mean, we talked a bit about your podcast, but the whole thing is you gave up alcohol, and you because you were quite a serious drinker, partied very hard.
Yeah.
How did you read books while you're doing that? That's like those two things together don't make sense to me.
Because I was doing nothing else. Like I would, during the day, I would just read. And during the night, I would drink and party and do all that sort of stuff. But the hangover was, I was always just reading. During my 20s, and when I went traveling, like I traveled quite a lot, so I'd read. I would just spend all day reading. I would just read as much as I possibly could. Yeah, I would just devour.
See the contrast in that though? Like it's not a usual thing for like a young party guy drinking heavily, doing drugs, doing crazy things, and then it's just like a massive bookworm. Like there's a massive contrast,
I'm
right?
not too sure.
Have you ever thought about it, or is it just?
I've never really thought about it, because like I had a couple of friends that were readers as well, so it didn't feel like anything strange. But then, besides those guys, every single other person I know had never read a book in their life. So
yeah, it's so uncommon these days.
I suppose it is. It is weird. Yeah, not many of my friends read. Yeah,
like none of mine. I'm not even that good of a reader. It might surprise. I don't like saying it, admitting it, but like I have a terrible attention span. I do read and I listen to audiobooks, but like I should be better. Anyway, it's not about me.
So yeah, since I got to India, I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of writing. I've been doing gigs in India as well. There's a comedy scene here, which is I wouldn't say it's vibrant, but it's it's active, I suppose. It exists, yeah. So that's been interesting. The crowds here, well, they don't like Australians straight up. So when they find out you're Australian, they don't like you.
What?
So you have to win them over. The Australian cricket team, they don't like the Australian cricket team. They think we're arrogant.
Nothing to do with me.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with, but also maybe like 8 to 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer than that, 12, 14 years ago, there were Indian students being beaten up in Australia.
Oh, that's right.
And that made the news over here. And so everyone thought, Australians were like racist against Indians.
That's embarrassing.
It wasn't really. Yeah.
So how do you win them over? They also don't
like us. You got to have good jokes. I have a couple of good jokes, but also when I tell them I'm married to an Indian, I sort of get a little bit of a free pass.
That would help.
Yeah, that helps. And then
do your jokes like transfer from Australian humor to?
Not all of them. Some do. Some do that I wouldn't have thought they would transfer, because there's like specific Australian things in it, but they seem to transfer, I don't know, for some reason. But others, they just don't. There's too many things, and then topics. yeah, and then just some topics you can't do here.
Yeah.
It just won't work. Yeah.
So have you written specific jokes for India?
Yeah, I've written
Is there
some
like
specific stuff.
a little one you could share?
What's one of them? It's basically, how does it go? Like I'm talking about, I say I know a lot about India. I watched Slumdog Millionaire because like Indians always say Slumdog Millionaire is not really India.
Right.
And that's what I say to them. I'm like, yeah, I watched Slumdog Millionaire, and that gets like some booze and shit. Like people are like, fuck you. I'm like, yeah, I learned everything I know from Slumdog Millionaire. And they're like, fuck you. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you were like. You were like Slumdog Millionaire is not what India is really like. And I'm like, it is though, isn't it? Really, Slumdog Millionaire is a lot like what India is. And then I go, I tell you what India is not like, fucking Indian movies. India is not like Indian movies at all. I'll watch an Indian movie and I'll be like, oh my God, India is going to dominate the next Olympics. And then, because they're superheroes, they're doing all the craziest shit. Like they're flying through the air, they're beating up like 12 dudes or like 28 dudes. Like their heroes in the Indian movies are like superheroes. and then the end of the joke is... And you unpack that
a bit. You like talk about the superheroes? Or
they just get and it? Then they get it. They get it immediately. I mean, this joke is bombing on Zoom to you. But in India it works.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
And then I go, and then the final like little bit is, and then I watch the Olympics, and I'm like, where the fuck is Rajnikant? And Rajnikant is a massive hero in India. Right. He's like the biggest hero.
Okay.
And he's the one that beats up 50 guys at once.
And you say, where the fuck is he? No, I bet it kills.
While I'm watching,
I could only imagine that it's just like got everyone in stitches. I have Indian friends.
It does well.
And they have great senses of humor.
To make this up to everyone who's listening, I'll record it and I'll put it up somewhere. So I can prove to you it works.
Just a cheeky little interjection from me. He did end up going away and recording it and sending me it back. It's just a voice recording, but I like it. So let's listen to it.
No fucking idea what he's on. I know a little bit about India though. Before I left Australia, I watched Slumdog Millionaire. I learnt a lot about this country. It's my favourite documentary now. You don't like Slumdog Millionaire as much as the rest of the world, do you? Like, Indians got a little bit angry at Slumdog Millionaire. I remember you were saying, Slumdog Millionaire is not what India is really like. But it is, isn't it? I tell you what India is not really like? Indian movies. India is nothing like Indian movies. Like, I'll watch an Indian movie and I'll be like, fuck, India's going to dominate the Olympics this year. Oh, fuck. And then I'll watch the Olympics and I'll be like, where the fuck is Rajnikant? Where's Rajni? Where is he?
Boyle, we have 3 minutes left. Do you have any feelings? Not feelings.
Did we speak about comedy at all?
A little bit, but you know, this is just like a chat show. And I'd love to have you back when my show develops a bit better. But this has been great. I think
I'll come on whenever you like.
Thank you. I think this question might be a bit like long for 2 minutes, but has the industry changed much in Australia since you started? Like noticeably, and besides the social media, this kind of like media, social.
Like when I started, the social media stuff didn't really exist to the extent it does now. Like you could do stand up, and it wasn't essential to. Well, Instagram. I don't even think Instagram was around. There was YouTube. YouTube was a big thing for like a few people when I started.
Right.
So, but you could ignore all that sort of shit, and then 5-6 years in, you're like, oh shit, I should have been doing all like Facebook stuff. Facebook algorithms back in the day, people would put a video up and it would blow up. Now it doesn't work like that.
No.
I mean, yeah, you could concentrate just on the stand-up. Now, like, you're crazy if you're just doing stand-up. The social media side of it is completely different now.
Yeah. And it's still changing. Like I'm going to talk to you after this again. We spoke about social media the other day about your platforms, and I'm going to backtrack on what I said after doing some strategy work on social media recently. It's just forever changing. Like the algorithms are always like flipping.
Yeah, I don't understand
unreliable.
any of it. I'm like a dinosaur in that respect. Like I have no idea what's going on. I just do the little things that I do and put it out, but I have no idea really what's going on.
Yeah. Well, you've nailed, I think essentially you've nailed it with the podcast. That's what you needed. We do have to wrap up, but would love to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
I'll come back on whenever you like. I'll come back on when the internet connection's a little bit better too.
Okay. It's like I said, it's authentic. So I'll speak to you very shortly.
Okay, beautiful.
That's David Boyle,
Bye-bye.
comedian David Boyle, everyone. Goodbye. Woo!